Hello, today we're going to be covering the most important topic in TFT, which is econ generation, your economy, your gold, how you interact with the game. This is going to be your get quick rich scheme for how you can get the most out of each of your games with some set 16 examples. We're going to discuss why econ is super important and specifically why it's really important in set 16 of all the sets in general, because econ is one of the most important things relative to the game right now. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. I normally do daily TFT guides. Sometimes it's covering more overall things like this, where I'm talking about econ generation. Other times it's going to be different tier lists, or it's going to be just related to like different comp guides and things like that. So please make sure to stay tuned if you want to get the most out of your set 16 experience. But anyways, let's talk about gold in TFT. So gold in TFT is massive. It's the most important thing because it's the main way that you interact with the game. Every single decision that you make, everything that you do requires gold in TFT. It's used to roll, it's used to buy units, it's used to level up. Everything that's on the screen when you play a game of TFT is going to be related to how you can use your gold in order to interact with it. If we look at any game of TFT, basically, you have your gold that you have over here, but then in order to buy XP, you need gold. In order to buy units from the shop, you need gold to buy these units. In order to reroll your shop and to find new units, you need gold. You need gold for everything besides actually putting the units up here. That's why it's so important, because if you don't have gold, you're not going to be able to interact with the game. And if you can't interact with the game, then what are you even doing? You're not even playing the game at that point. Because it's like the main way that you interact as well, it's also the main way to reduce variance. If I gave you infinite amount of gold, you would be able to make any board that you want. You would be able to roll for any unit that you want. You would be able to push any level that you want. You can make any decision you want if you have more gold. And the less gold you have, the more subject you are to just high rolling, hoping that something just appears. If you have no gold to roll your shop, you better hope that your shop just shows you all of the best units in the game, because you won't be able to dig for them. That's why gold is so important, because not only do you use it to interact with everything, it's the main way that you reduce that random element of TFT. The best players in the world, they're the ones that manage your gold in a much superior way than some of the other players, because they're just able to take control of the game by using that gold to reduce the variance, to let them hit or play what they intend on playing, or to give them the opportunity to buy units, push levels, play flexibly, all of that stuff. And that's why it's one of the most important concepts that we're going to cover. Arguably the most important. Obviously, you can argue other things are a little bit more important, but I think it's the most important concept. Additionally, this set is expensive. It is very expensive because there is a large tailoring towards the high cost units this set. In previous sets, there are sometimes certain reroll comps or certain low cost units that are really broken. The balance this set is to try and make the expensive units worth their weight in gold. You're trying to find those 5 costs because those 5 costs are really impactful. They have team-wide benefits that can help out everybody, or they do a lot of damage, or both in some cases. And the idea is that you want to eventually find a way to cap out your board around expensive units. Additionally, there are unlockable units. Unlockable units that cost a lot of gold. There are 7 gold units in the game. These units cost way more than anything else. So in order to not only have the gold, in order to hit your board, stabilize your board, cap your board, you also have to be able to afford the actual units themselves, which is why set 16 is arguably one of the more expensive sets to play around, requiring you to have a lot more of a grasp on your econ management, because it really translates to you being able to win games in a lot of cases. So how do you get gold? This is just a general overview for the next couple of slides, because I want to make this open for beginner players who might just be looking at this for their first time or playing the game starting this set. But in general, you get gold per round. In the first couple of rounds of the game, it starts with 2, 3, 4, and then 5. But essentially, you're earning 5 gold per round for most of the game. After it ramps up a little bit, this is like a part of like a balancing thing. You basically have 5 gold per round for just existing in the round. So that's like your little bit of spending cash. You can decide what you want to do with it. Additionally, you can generate gold by making interest. We're going to talk a lot about interest because that's the main way that you can take control of the game, is by making sure that you make econ intervals or earn a certain amount of interest, because you can get up to 5 gold per round from interest alone. So that's another 5 gold you can use to spend and do whatever you want with. Additionally, if you win a round, you get a gold. And additionally, there's streaking gold, right? If you win or lose streak, you can get up to 3 gold. So basically, if you're consecutively winning or consecutively losing, you can earn some extra gold. Of course, there's also augments and drops, like you can just get gold from neutral rounds or gold from augment choices that just give you gold. But additionally, certain units and traits can also be gold generation tools, which we'll talk about in this presentation as well. So your job as a good player, I want to make it very clear. If you want to be a good player at TFT, you do not want to waste gold. You want to ask yourself every time you spend gold if it is worth it. You don't want to needlessly throw around your gold like you're rich and everything is great. You want to be very greedy with it. Not necessarily too greedy, but you have to ask yourself at every point in time when you're spending gold if it's worth it and if it's actually useful to what you want to do. And you want to optimize when you spend your gold. Every 2 gold, this is the way you should always think about this game. Every 2 gold that you spend is another shop that could have been your high roll. That's another shop that you could have hit an Annie on level 8. That's another shop that you could have hit, I don't know who your most favorite unit, a Senna, right? That shop, that 2 gold, that is one shop that could have been your high roll shop. When you look at somebody else and they have a high roll spot and you're like, that guy high rolled, he's so trash, how did he get all of these units? Guess what? If you have an extra 2 gold, you have a chance of seeing the same type of shop. And every time that you waste that gold, is another chance that you're not getting that high roll. We'll talk a little about rolling odds and all of that in a little bit, but you also notice that the early gold and a lot of gold on your main roll downs is going to be really, really impactful in whether or not you actually hit and stabilize your board as well. But first, let's talk a little bit about making interest. Making interest is really important. I use this graph. I usually do this type of presentation. I try and put a new spin on it, depending on what the meta is like. But I always come back to, like, you know, some of these early pictures that I made a couple sets ago. But basically, the idea is that on the left side of your screen, you will see your interest. If you have a skin or something else, like for your arena, you'll see them as different icons. But basically, there's these 5 open slots, and you'll see like these little bubbles that join up here. These bubbles translate to how much every 10 gold that you have, right? So in this bank right now, I have 40 gold. So as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 generation tools of interest, right? So basically, for every 10 gold, you get +1 interest. That's like the idea. So for every 10 gold that you save in your bank here, you're earning +1 gold per round. It might seem like a little thing, like who really cares, +1 gold, whatever. Why does it really matter? We're going to use this graph that I made a little bit ago. But the idea here is that I want to show 2 types of players. One player that is being very greedy and trying to increase their interest every single turn. So here I'm trying to make a graph that kind of tries to illustrate the gold that you can gain from interest alone. And I'm showing 2 players. Let's start with the orange player, right? The orange player, basically what I'm saying is you save 10 gold your first round. So then you're making +1. Then the next turn, you're saving 20 gold, so you get +2. The next turn, you're saving 30 gold, you're going +3, then +4, and then up to your maximum interest of +5 per round. What I'm basically saying is that you start with 10 gold, then the next round you try and make 20 gold, and then the next round you try and save up 30 gold, and I'm just trying to say like you're speed running to 50, right? Because as soon as you have 50 gold in your bank, you're earning +5 gold per round, which is great. That's one way of showing things. Now, of course, I'm going to show a player that maybe isn't doing that. Maybe you don't decide to make gold early. You instead push levels. Uh-oh, I didn't make interest. Then you decide to buy units in your shop. Uh-oh, you didn't make interest. Okay, well, now I'm going to push another level. Uh-oh, you didn't make interest. It's like, okay, well, now I'm going to buy some more units in my shop. And basically, you're postponing when you actually start generating that bank, generating that little collection of 50 gold to generate your econ. And I'll say, like, you know, this is not even uncommon, especially with beginner players. Sorry, this is a little bit in the way. I'll try and move it. But, you know, you might get all the way to, like, you know, end of stage 2 and you're still not generating interest. This is like to try and illustrate this, like, you know, 6 rounds have passed, so you're starting stage 3, and then only then you start generating interest. If you compare the 2 players, the player that made a bunch of interest early and a player that just postponed making the interest, you can compare their final gold difference as being like 25 gold. And in some cases, it can be even more than that. 25 gold is a lot of gold. It is a very impactful amount that can often sway the way that your outcome, that your game kind of changes, or the outcome of your game. A lot of it starts with your early game, right? Early game on stage 2, you really need to be focusing on making interest. In most games, it's going to be very rare that you don't want to be making interest on stage 2. Because as soon as you can start generating this econ, as soon as you can start generating this bank, then you're good to go, because then you're getting +5 gold every single round. The way you can look at it is that every single turn that you're delaying making interest is a turn in the future that you're not gaining +5 gold. That's why there's a 25 gold gap here, because this person took 5 extra turns to make 50 gold. Because this person turned 5 extra turns to start making interest, they're 5 turns behind on making +5 gold per round. It's extremely important. The way that I always like to say it is that you want to speed run 50 gold. That should be your goal every single game. You want to speed run making 50 gold. Now, obviously, you can make decisions that will change that. Sometimes you might postpone it a round. You might postpone it 2 rounds. Of course, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen every game. But in most of your games, your goal walking into the game off rip initially should be to speed run 50 gold so you can be making +5 gold per round. I'm going to show you something. It's a little bit of a flashbang, so please be careful. Like, you know, I've warned you. Bang. Sorry about that. I don't know how to make this site dark mode, but this is a TFT rolling odds calculator website. It's a little bit cut off on the top, but this is something I'd like to do just to illustrate a little bit of how much gold can really matter on a roll down. Let's say a lot of the times you're trying to get to level 8, you're trying to roll for those 4 costs, roll for those 5 costs. You're trying to roll on level 8 for a 4 cost unit. So I'm going to put level 8, right, current level 8, and I'm rolling for a 4 cost unit. A lot of times the way TFT is balanced is that it's really easy to find the first couple copies of the unit. But let's say you're trying to roll down your gold, right? This is excluding the gold you need to actually buy the units. But let's say you're looking for one particular 4 cost. Let's say you're trying to play around Lysandra and you really want to see a Lysandra because that is the unit that you want to play and that is who you're trying to play around. If you try and roll your gold, you'll see that it doesn't take that much gold to be statistically likely to try and find a Lysandra. But a lot of times it takes, like, you know, 20-ish or 20 or more than 20 gold just to find a single copy of the unit. And even here, it's a 60% chance. It's not particularly likely. A lot of times on a level 8 roll down, the general rule of thumb, just because it's a nice round number, you know, it's like simple digits, is usually around like 50-ish gold, right? A lot of times 50 gold makes it pretty likely you're going to find 1 copy of any unit that you're looking for, and then additionally finding 2 copies is going to be pretty good. And then in some cases, like around a third of your games, you're going to high roll and you're going to hit their 2-star upgrade. Now, a 2-star upgrade for a 4 cost might be something you think is like the expectation, right? You roll down on level 8, you expect to see a 2-star 4 cost. A lot of times that comes down to whether or not you're contested. There's other things that come into play. These odd calculators also aren't perfect, by the way. This is updated for set 15, set 16, level 8s are more common. Also, there's like set 16, if you unlock units, the odds change. So don't take the numbers for granted. It's more of like a rule of thumb type of thing. But this is without even accounting for the units that you have to buy. This is just the gold you want to roll down. And if you can see, remember when we were talking about our graph, 25 gold, look at how astronomically different your game can look, right? I'm not trying to say it like, you know, the exact numbers. What I'm trying to say is like the odds of you hitting your units is so much lower with 20 less gold. It is like so astronomically different that you will very likely not high roll. You will very likely be in a bad spot. That's why this type of gold matters a lot, because you might not think of it as a lot at first, but this is just an illustrative example that I'm trying to make of you not making interest in 1 or 2 rounds. You might say, so what, who cares, -1, -2. It adds up, and when the gold adds up, each of those add up things that you do is gold that you're not using to roll. It's gold that you're not being able to find your units, and it's extra variance that you're adding to yourself. You can imagine if you level to 8 and you only have 1 gold to roll, you better hope that you see a fucking giga unit in your next shop, because you have like no chance of seeing anything. You know what I mean? That's like the idea that you're going for. And obviously there's other things you can do, like play flexibly and other things that make this better, but it's just like from the gold perspective, that's why it matters so much. So you want to make your econ intervals very often, right? Early econ is the most important because you want to start generating 5 gold. It doesn't matter if you generate 5 gold later in the game. It matters that you generate 5 gold at the start of the game, because if you generate 5 gold at the start of the game, you can push levels, you can buy units, you can roll if you really need to. You have lots of opportunity to decide what to do in the game. If you have a bunch of gold at the last stage of the game, who the fuck cares? Because you're dead anyways. You need the gold early. That's why making interest early is important. And also, if possible, you want to win and lose streak. We'll probably talk about that a little bit in this presentation as well. And often you don't want to drop below 30 gold. This is a rule of thumb that you'll hear a lot from a lot of players, including myself. Why do I say don't drop below 30 gold? Well, remember, if we do a little breakdown of how much gold you make per round, right? Remember, you get 5 gold per round. Then you get your gold from your interest. So if you have 30 gold, you get plus 3 gold of interest. And then a lot of times if you win streak or lose streak, you can have a little bit of extra gold from that. But the idea is that if you have 30 gold, it's very easy to make it to 40 gold because you can easily make 8 gold here. So then you're at 38. And the idea is that if you make it to 40, then you can make it back to 50 really easily. It's very easy to bounce back to this 50 gold interest. As opposed to if you're like 20 gold or 10 gold or even 0 gold, you won't get enough gold from your interest to make it back to 50. So technically, if you look at the math, there's lots of people, like, you know, if you want to be really technical about it, technically you want to not drop below 32 gold, because then 32 gold plus the 8 gold, so 5 gold per round plus the interest, will make it to 40. But just as a rule of thumb, the idea is that not dropping below 30 is really important, because with the interest, it makes it very easy to make it to 40 and make it back to 50. Because if possible, if you ever want to greed or get back to earning 5 gold per round, this helps you not to fall behind in the lobby. If you drop below 30 gold, then you have to rebuild your interest. Those are multiple turns now that you're losing out on earning 5 gold per round. That's why the rule of thumb is like that. But of course, if you have to drop below 30, if you're going to be dead next turn, if you're not in a spot that you can greed, if you need to hit your upgrades because you're scared because somebody else has a win condition, obviously drop below 30 gold. I'm not saying not to do it ever. I'm saying this is like the rule of thumb of what you should be aiming to do in your games because it helps you to maintain your econ generation. Examples, right? So I'll give you some examples with some gameplay, but one thing that I see a lot of players struggle with is usually like, not making interest for a variety of reasons. Often it's holding too many units, it's needlessly griefing other players, things like that. For example, this is a gameplay from today. This happens in all my games, by the way. I always try and make interest where I can, but this is like early in stage 2. I'm playing a little bit more of a tempo style opener, trying to save HP, playing Yordle units, and as you can see, actually I think I want to go back a turn or two. Excuse me. So here, for example, I'm at 10 gold. I can't make interest very easily because obviously I'm playing these units on my board. And as you can see, I'm holding a bunch of extra Teemos on my bench. It's just because I hit them in my Yordle shop, so I'm just buying them. But as you can see, I'm holding some units on my bench here. But I won't be able to make interest because even if I sell all of these, it's only 6 gold. So I'm at 17. I can't make it to 20. What really matters is making it to those divisions of 10. So as you can see, what I'm saying is I'm holding some extra Teemos here. And then as the fight goes on, you'll see I end up losing, whatever. It's one of those games. It'd be like that. But as you can see, next turn, I'm able to make interest here. Even though I'm playing Teemo and I have Teemos, the chances are I'm not going to go for Teemo 3 this game. It's just not worthwhile. I'm not looking for a reroll angle. I think the reroll line in this particular case is not very good. Unless you have an insane spot that you know that you're playing reroll, it doesn't make sense to hold on to these extra units. So you'll see that I'll very quickly sell them. I'll sell them so I can make 20, and that way I can start my econ generation. Of course, this was a game where I didn't have early econ. I'm trying my best to play around it. This was a game of today. I have lots of other games that I've played, but basically this is the thought process you should have every single round. Every single round, no matter what's on your bench, even if they're for upgrades, even if they're for units, you should always be considering, can I be making interest and how important is it to hold those units? A lot of times people will just hold like 100 of the same unit and say, uh-oh, I'm going to get a 3-star and then it'll be really strong. And it's like most of the time this 3-star is useless because you don't want to play them on your final board anyways. Don't try and needlessly hold units, and by the same logic, don't try and needlessly grief other players, right? Unless you're particularly trying to like, make sure somebody else loses. Holding a bunch of extra stuff on your bench is usually where you are unable to make those interest intervals. And also pushing levels and doing stuff like that. Every time you spend gold, you should think about what are the logic behind spending gold. Now, obviously, the example I gave you, not the greatest of examples because obviously I wasn't making econ earlier in the game, but it was just like because I was playing buried treasures and I had some upgrades and it was a particularly low econ encounter. But of course, every single game that you play, you should always be trying to make interest as soon as possible whenever you can. Additionally, this is separate from the video. I just always forget to tell you guys about it. YouTube memberships. If you want to be a silver member supporter, I sometimes post members exclusive content, and you also get badges and emojis if you stop by the live stream. Gold members, you get a VOD review. Prismatic members is a coaching session. So if you want a coaching session from yours truly, you can sign up with YouTube memberships. And additionally, if you sign up for coaching, there's a holiday gift bundle. It's a little Poro card. I'm going to link it here as well. You can buy it on your own. It's on my art store, but you can also get one for free if you sign up for Prismatic coaching. So that's just open. That's open until supplies last. So go for it. Now, let's talk about lose streak versus win streak. Lose streaking is something that a lot of people do very easily, and it really depends on the patch and the set whether or not lose streak is really good or not. But lose streak, the idea is that it's very easy and consistent to do so. So another way that you can generate gold is by purposely trying to lose rounds. What I mean by that is, let's say you're playing around a weak opener, or you don't have a particularly strong opener, you don't have upgrades, you don't have unit pairs, you don't have things that synergize. What you could do is you could just focus on making interest. And by focusing on making interest and focusing on lose streaking, you get a lot of gold from the lose streak. It's very easy to do, it's very consistent, but a lot of times it requires you to have like a very win out potential, but it's a great way to generate a lot of econ very easily. And that's why you'll often see players sometimes purposely play towards a lose streak, because a lot of times if you're not going to win the round anyways, you should just go for the streak, make sure that you lose all the rounds consecutive instead of winning one round and then griefing your streak, and that way you generate a lot of gold that way. Additionally, there are win streaks. Win streaks are often a lot harder to play around because obviously you need to high roll, right? If you're win streaking, it's because you got dealt something really good in your early game that you're able to win the rounds with. Lose streaking, it doesn't matter what you're dealt with, you can always go for a lose streak. But often with win streak, you're going to be spending gold to keep that streak. Because obviously, if you're winning multiple rounds, in order to keep winning the rounds, you have to keep being the strongest player in the lobby. That requires you to spend gold on XP, and also requires you to maybe spend gold on rerolls to make sure that you actually upgrade your units and are continuing to be strong. For that reason, it can be often very hard to win streak. Now with both of these strategies, ideally you try and do one of them, but you often cannot, right? If you lose streak too much, you'll lose too much HP and you'll go into a bad spot. So it really depends on your spot. If you have augments or a board that is indicative of being really strong with a lose streak, then it makes sense to lose streak. But otherwise, you might want to mix streak. You might want to try and lose streak a little bit, try and win streak a little bit, see if you can save HP. Everything in TFT is a resource. The HP that you spend, the HP that you use, the gold that you spend, it's all has to be landed perfectly so that at the end of the game you have the strongest board possible. But the one thing I want to say is that a lot of times people get really concerned with lose streaking and win streaking. Make sure that you're making interest. Interest is another thing you can control, and lose streaking you can't control very easily. You might be able to, but you might grief your game by just losing all your HP and then just dying to some high roller later. And win streaking you can't really control. Somebody else can high roll and just snap your win streak because they got like a really good unit in their shop and they just win out because they have the better units. What you can control is your interest. So in a lot of rounds, whether you're win streaking or lose streaking, you should always be prioritizing interest, because whether your lose streak gets griefed or your win streak gets griefed, make sure that you still have the interest generation, because that will still make sure that you have a decent amount of gold to play around with later in the game. Now let's talk about Econ augments. Econ augments. This one's the big one, right? A lot of times when you're trying to play around the game, you take augments that give you some form of econ. Now, econ can come in many different ways. A lot of times we're talking about gold and actual spending cash, but in augment forms, there are many different variations of this. There are augments that just give you gold as part of a byproduct of something else. Here I put Silver Destiny. Silver Destiny, like there's many augments, not even Silver Destiny. There's other augments like gain a component and some gold, gain this and some gold, gain this and some gold. If anything gives you a little bit of gold, that is gold you can use to make interest, right? If you're making interest early, you're starting your bank. This 4 gold, make sure that it makes it into a +1. Then it becomes a +2, a +3, a +4, and a +5 every single turn because you make 50 gold in your bank. That's like the idea of these types of augments that give you early gold. You can treat them as like a budget way to make econ early. And the amount of gold that an augment gives is often very indicative of how strong it is. The strong, like a lot of augments are actually balanced around this extra gold. You'll see patch notes where it'll be like, they change a gold from 4 to 6, or they change it from 4 to 2, just to try and like balance the augment a little bit. And it comes from you making that early interest off of it. Then there's augments that just give you gold every round. Something raining gold, this is like the average one, right? The gold augment that just gives you gold. This gives you gold every round, and it starts you with 8 gold instantly. So once again, you make your interest and you keep going. There are other forms of econ, such as XP, right? You can gain XP every single round. Basically, what this means is you don't have to spend XP on leveling. Sorry, you don't have to spend gold on leveling up. So similarly, you use that gold to make interest, and then you use the augment to get XP. Or to get EXP, so you can level up that way if you're trying to play towards high level comps. And additionally, there's also rerolls, right? This is the same idea. Now you don't spend your gold on reroll, so you can prioritize your gold on your interest to make your +1, +2, up to +5, right? Make 50 gold in your bank. And also, like, use your shop rerolls at any point in the game. All of these are ways of having econ, and they can all be used to generate early interest, which is the main thing that you'd be trying to do. Obviously, you can try and win streak, you can try and lose streak. That's beyond me. That is based on your game and your certain circumstances. But every game, if you have the strategy to make early interest, you will have a much better experience in TFT. Additionally, there are econ augments that happen later in the game. There are lots of bailout econ augments that I showed, and whenever I rank augments, I always say these are bailouts, you just take them if you need them. The idea is that if you don't have econ early, you could get econ later, and a lot of times these later econ augments usually give you a huge amount of gold. You might look at this, you might be like, this gives me only 4 gold, this gives me 45 gold. Fenrir, 45 gold is a lot of gold. This augment is broken. What are they thinking? The reason you get so much gold with late game bailout econ augments is because you don't generate interest off of this. If it's stage 4, you need this gold to compensate for all of the gold that you missed out on stage 2 and stage 3. But if you take this on 4-2, all of stage 2, all of stage 3, all the way up until stage 4, you are not generating interest, or not generating interest as easily. You can't play around the augments, you can't push levels, you're not being strong, you're not getting an earlier crack at some of the high cost units because you're early level 6, level 7. It's way more important to have the econ early. But to compensate, these ones give you a lot of gold, and that's why they're kind of like bailouts. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the strongest thing in the game, but it's like, you know, if you need the econ, they're there, and that's kind of like the way that they're balanced around it. But a lot of times it's better to have the econ early because you're able to play around your early game a lot better. If I have something like Raining Gold, that's a lot better to have it earlier rather than later, or Cluttered Mine, or Shopping Spree, because I can use these earlier in the game to not only generate interest, which is going to pay dividends, I'm going to get lots and lots of gold by the end of the game, but I can also use this gold to buy shops. I can use this gold to roll. I can use this gold to level earlier. It allows me to be more of a threat on stage 2 and stage 3, which puts me in a better spot late game because it also allows me to generate some HP, or not generate, save some HP, as well as like while also generating gold, so to speak. But anyways, there's also these ones. I just wanted to mention it. There's a lot of them in this set. There's lots of ones like they give XP. There's ones that give rerolls, right? They made a huge amount of them, especially on the prismatic level. And a lot of times they just come into play on whether or not you need it later because you didn't have econ earlier. But like I said, early econ is important. Another way you can look at it, this is an example of an augment that looks suspiciously like not very broken, but in reality to me is actually pretty strong. This is gain gold, right? It's gain 21 gold. Gain 21 gold, you get on 3-2. If you don't have econ to make interest, 21 gold is not just 21 gold to play around with. It's 21 gold plus 2 gold per turn, right? Because you're getting 2 gold of interest with 20 gold. If your bank says 20, you're getting plus 2 interest every turn, which will eventually be plus 3, plus 4, plus 5. Augments like these are really powerful. Just getting a lump sum of gold at any point in the game, as long as it's early enough in the game that you can use it to generate interest, is going to be pretty powerful and pretty important. Now, obviously, I'm not saying it's the most broken augment in the game, because obviously, like situationally, if you're already at 50 gold, then it's just 21 gold of cash, not technically 2 gold per turn, because interest caps out at 5, so it's not going to go infinite, right? It's not an exponential climb. Like, there's lots of math involved and stuff like that, but like a lot of times, if it's early in the game, you can't go wrong. That's like the idea. Stage 2 and stage 3, getting gold, especially if you don't already have it, is going to elevate your gameplay by a huge amount in most cases. Additionally, this is something that I usually don't talk about in these presentations, but specifically for set 16, this one comes into play a lot. Stacking econ augments. In many cases, if you have 2 econ augments, they can actually become really powerful together, actually more powerful than they are individually or alone. Now, it might sound like a little bit whack, but let me give an example, right? If you have an augment that gives you a bunch of gold, and then you have something like level up that gives you XP, that makes it cheaper to buy XP, then you have like a giga econ augment, because now you have a huge amount of gold to use with your other econ augment to efficiently be able to level. This is really important in fast 9 metas. Currently right now we're in a meta where a lot of the really powerful units are 5 cost. A lot of times people are trying to play around these expensive units. They're trying to play around like Shyvana and Annie and Fiddlesticks and Senna and etc, 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 right? But a lot of times, because like you need to get to a certain level to make it more likely to see these units, there's a huge amount of consistency in taking 2 econ augments. Obviously, I'm not saying you should do this every game. Every time you take an econ augment, you're making it so you have less variance, right? Remember we talked about how with gold, it reduces the amount of variance that you have when playing the game because you have more gold to use on your rerolls, so you have less RNG, you have more gold to level, right? It allows you to interact with the game a little bit better. However, there's also other augments which are combat augments. So if you take too many econ augments, you'll hit your board, yes. But if another person hits a similar strength board, if they also are able to make it to the same units as you, they will be stronger than you because they will have a combat augment. That's something we're going to talk a little bit more about in later guides when I talk more about augment selection in general. But for right now, especially on the current patch, making it to level 9 is really impactful, and often stacking econ augments could be really important just because it makes it really consistent because they stockpile with each other. If you have augments that give you rerolls and one that gives you gold or XP and rerolls or like different methods like that, then it gives you like more of a potential because now you have the gold to not only get to the right level, but you also have the gold to spend on the units or the rerolls or vice versa, which usually is pretty powerful in these types of situations. Additionally, in set 16, there's other things that people usually play around. A lot of times, like I'm talking about double Econ, this is an example of one Econ. You can take an Econ augment, or you can have an Econ encounter like Scuttle Puddle, where you get a lot of gold to play around with, but you actually have a lot of potential opportunities around certain traits and synergies that give you extra methods of Econ. One example is Yordle. Yordle is kind of geared more towards reroll, but a lot of people play Yordle for tempo, because with Yordle, you know, 2 Yordle gives you like some extra stats. 4 Yordle allows you to upgrade your Yordles really easily because you get the Yordles in your shop. So this can be really good for your early game. But then additionally, 6 Yordle gives you free rerolls every round. It just got nerfed, but it still gives you rerolls every round. And 8 Yordle gives you grab bags, but usually involves a lot of gold. So Yordle can actually be a really great way to play 6 and 8 to get a lot of extra rolls and rolls as well as gold that can help you to hit really high cap boards. Additionally, Bilgewater. Bilgewater, you get to upgrade your units pretty easily because you can, if you have Bilgewater in early, you can just like use the Bilgewater duplicators from the shops to upgrade everybody or buy copies of the units. Additionally, Bilgewater also you can use just to buy copies of units and sell them as an Econ generation tool. That is something that is really powerful and can work out really well. Additionally, Ionia I put here. There are 2 types of Ionias that work really well in the current landscape of the game. One of them gives you XP per turn. Obviously, they're not going to show up right here because this website just shows you one of them. But in general, there's 2 Ionia changes every game. One of them gives you gold for takedowns. Obviously, that gives you gold. One of them gives you XP for having Ionia in. That one gives you XP. Both of them are quite strong in being able to generate Econ to allow you to make it more easily to level 8 or those higher levels that you want to play around. Additionally, Zillion stores XP. Bard is a situational unit. You don't really play him for Econ. I think he's only good in certain reroll lines, obviously, because with Bard, remember we were talking about early interest, early Econ. Bard, you have to grief your early interest a lot of times because you have to reroll before stage 2. So instead of being able to make it those early interest intervals, unless you have like a certain reroll augment that gives you free rolls, it's going to be hard to unlock Bard and then also have enough gold to push high level. So he's more locked towards certain reroll lines, which is what makes him a thing. Additionally, there are other units I think that can also do stuff like Tom Kench. There's other units that drop resources and gold and stuff. I just want to give you the major ones right here just because I think those ones are the main ones that you want to look at as extra 16 Econ generation tools. Lastly, before we end today, I just want to talk about sometimes Econ can go wrong. So a lot of times when Econ goes wrong and you're particularly poor, a lot of times because you're holding too many units or holding the wrong units, you want to make sure you're holding units that are going to be relevant on your board or relevant in your late game. Those are the only ones you really want to break interest for, is if it's a unit that's really important that you're scared isn't going to come back or that might not hit because you might have good odds of fighting them later. A lot of times, like, you know, people just level needlessly, right? When you level, you have to ask yourself, why am I leveling? Am I putting in a unit that makes me stronger? Am I actually trying to win streak? What is the point of me leveling at this particular moment? You always have to think about that. Additionally, you can get baited into being strong. A lot of times you're really poor because you think that you're really strong. You're like, oh, look, I have an upgrade. Surely I win streak, and then you start pushing levels. That can be really bad because if you don't scout, you don't see what other people are doing, and you don't have the win streak, if you're not making interest by pushing levels and using your gold needlessly, then you're going to put yourself in a really bad spot. So that's like one of the main things. And then obviously, taking no Econ augments. Your Econ is relative, right? That's one thing that I didn't really mention in this presentation. But if you are not as rich as somebody else, if that person is richer than you, they will hit the units and you won't, right? If you're competing for the same units, they will hit the units and you won't. That is what is going to happen on average. A lot of times, if you take no Econ, or if you don't have Econ and the rest of your lobby has Econ, you are going to fall further and further behind. Imagine your whole lobby takes an early Econ augment and they're all generating interest. They're all getting plus 5 gold per round. And you don't take an Econ augment. Now you are not generating 5 gold per round because you're not making your early interest. You're not at the same intervals as everybody else. They are going to steamroll you because they're going to be so much richer than you by the end of the game that they will be able to play anything that they want, hit everything that they want, and you're going to look around and you're going to be like, how do these people high roll these spots? How are they so cool? How are they so rich? I suck. And really, it's because you just didn't make Econ early. And that's like a lot of the point of it. So a lot of times it's like keeping up with your lobby. This matters a lot with prismatics. This is something that I often see players not really recognize or acknowledge as being a big issue. But like, if in your lobby there is like a prismatic opener and everybody takes a prismatic Econ augment, for example, like they take not this one's like a late game one. If like the rest of your lobby takes something that gives them Econ early, something like going long or hedge fund or something else, and you take a combat augment, if you do not win streak with it from stage 2, you are going to be very far behind because everybody's going to be so much richer because these augments give you so much extra gold. It's a lot of it is maintaining a similar game plan as what the other people in your lobby are doing, and that's going to help you a little bit. Additionally, if you are greeding too much gold, that can also be an issue. Greeding too much, you might drop too low on HP, and then you have margins too thin to win out. You just fight one person that high rolled, and then you lose the game. If you take too many Econ augments, you might not be strong enough. You still need to balance that with combat. You want to make sure that even if you have Econ and you hit your board, you still want them to hit. You don't want to have a bunch of pool noodles, right? You need items. You need stuff on them to make them strong. And additionally, if you don't identify what you need for stability, a lot of times, like, people will say, hey, it's really hard to get to level 8 this set because they buffed level 8. Right? Or sorry, they made level 8 more expensive to reach. A lot of times in your mid game, you have to decide whether or not you roll for upgrades. For example, if I start the game and I have 2 Rek'Sai and I have, and I'm level 6, I can use some of my gold to roll for a Rek'Sai 2 to potentially stabilize myself. A lot of times when you're rolling, it comes down to how efficient those rolls are. This is something that a lot of people get confused. You either roll because you think like, oh, I'll just be strong late in the mid game, and then you grief your Econ because you're losing interest intervals, you're losing Econ. A lot of times, the main thought process you should have is that if you have a bunch of unit pairs on your bench, let's just take a Void example like this, right? If you have, I would say, 2 or more upgrades on your bench, and you are worried about your HP, like let's say you're not win streaking, you have low HP, if you have 2 or more upgrades that you can potentially hit on your bench, it makes sense to roll. It makes sense to roll because you can see many things in your shop, right? You can see other units to play, you can obviously high roll something that's really strong, but additionally, you are rolling for more than one thing. Whenever you are choosing to roll in the game of TFT, you never want to be rolling for just one thing. If I have everything upgraded except for one unit on my board, I'm not going to roll for that one unit. Because even if I hit that unit, I'm going to grief my board, I'm going to grief my Econ so much that it's not going to matter. Because the odds of me finding one thing in my shop is very low. The odds of finding multiple things in your shop is most important. So whenever you're in a spot in your game, sometimes you greed your Econ too much. You're like, oh, I'll just sit here, I won't roll, I won't be stable, I won't decide. This also happens when people try and go level 9. A lot of times you might have a bunch of unit pairs on your board, and you're like, I'm level 8, and I'm going to make it to level 9. And by the time you make it to level 9, you lose all your HP and you die anyways. A lot of it is identifying if you are stable or not. Are you losing rounds, and are you losing them badly? If you are, you have to look at what the potentials are of you either greeding for the win out, or the potential that you have to roll earlier to make sure that you stabilize. And a lot of times it's a balance of that comes into a play-by-play, like game-by-game situation, which I try and identify. You can check out my VOD channel, right? I have a VOD channel where I talk about my decision-making all the time. I'm trying to post some videos where I do roll on level 8, and I do decide whether or not I'm in a win out spot, and I do play for my unit pairs and stuff like that. You can check out some of these VODs. If we get the VOD channel to 1,000 subs, I'll do a giveaway. So, there's some incentive for you to check out some of those videos as well. Last thing, running out of breath here. Whew. We're through a chat. We're through one of the most important videos of the set. This is like a little slide that you can use to just know some good intervals to level and to do stuff, right? 3-1, if people are playing 1-cost rerolls, that's usually where they reroll aggressively. That's not really a thing in set 16, but it's still something that holds true. On stage 3-2, a lot of times this is a good interval to level, and you get your augment on 3-2, so a lot of people will either roll to stabilize, or they'll level to 6, or they'll like do something on this round, because you get information with your augment, and you kind of power up a little bit. So 3-2 is an important round to scout and just see what's going on. 3-5, this is after the carousel round. It's another perfect interval to level. By the way, when I say perfect interval, what I mean by that is, let me just show you real quick. Perfect intervals are really important. It might not seem that important at first, but it's something that you kind of have to get used to. When you buy XP, you have to buy it in groups of 4. So basically, you want to try and time your levels with buying XP when this number is divisible by 4. So as you see right now, I only need 2 XP to level up, right? I only need 2. So if I buy 4 XP, there'll be a little bit of spillover, right? It'll be like, instead of being 8 out of 10, it will be 12 out of 10. And then like the denominator will change because of the next level up. That's why there's things called perfect intervals. On certain stages in the game, it's divisible by 4. And when it's divisible by 4, it means that you don't have that overspill. The overspill is important because basically you're saving 2 gold. And that 2 gold that you save that doesn't get wasted into overspill now is able to be used as an extra shop reroll. It's really important for optimizing and it's something you just generally want to do and keep track of. Additionally, that 2 gold sometimes can grief your interest, right? You'll see me a lot of times, I won't really care about these perfect intervals if I have an infinite amount of gold, because if I'm leveling to 7 and I know that I'm going to level 8, then the gold technically isn't that wasted because it's going to be like afterwards. But it's just like a level of optimization is usually to level on certain rounds, and that's just how TFT is kind of played to optimize the game a little bit. That's why I'm showing you these rounds, for example, right? That's why 4-2, that's where most people level up. 4-2, you get your last augment, and most of the lobby levels to 8 because it's a perfect interval. So you don't waste the extra gold, and you have that extra gold that you might need to roll in your shop or might need to make interest. And it's like the main power spike. That's why these intervals are the ones where you normally would see people, if they're considering that, doing this level of power spiking. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Hopefully this was fun and informative, and hopefully there were some examples, and maybe you learned something new. Obviously, this is very similar to some of the other econ guides I do for the other sets, but I always like to talk about it a little bit with a set 16 twist. Obviously, set 16 really important to have econ because of the high cost units, as well as the increased cost to level to 8 and to 9. So you definitely want to consider managing your econ as best as possible, because like I said, that's the main way you interact with the game, and also the main way you reduce the variance. So next time you're low rolling in your game, next time something's going wrong, make sure to look through your previous game, maybe record your VOD, and consider, did I make the maximum amount of interest this game? Did I save my econ in the best way possible? Because that's the place to start. And that's usually where a lot of players will easily find the best experiences on how they can improve to rank up, improve to get to new heights, and get to those high tiers, whatever your dream rank is in this game. Right? A big part of it is always econ, and that's something that everybody can improve on. Even myself, I can improve on. So always make sure to pay attention, stay tuned, and of course, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. See ya. Bye-bye.